Thank you. We are honored today at this very critical time to have the rare opportunity to personally hear Danny Danon, member of the Knesset and Chairman of World Likud, and we are privileged that Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors was chosen to host him in the community. We welcome you all here and we thank you for coming at what we know is a very difficult hour of the day to get around in Los Angeles. I do want to acknowledge that there was not one person who complained about this time, not a one, which is a tribute to Knesset member Danon and to the eagerness that exists to hear him. Menke Danon will take questions following his talk, for which you have been given a 3x5 card and a pencil. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we will pick it up. At this time, we kindly ask that you turn off your cell phones and any other electronic gadgets. I am a child of Holocaust survivors, and I am convinced that had there been a Jewish state of Israel at that horrific time in history, there would not have been a Holocaust. To make my point, I paraphrase David Solway's article in yesterday's Front Page magazine titled "The Jewish Paradox," which reflects my personal feelings. And I quote, "Although I am not an observant Jew, I am nevertheless strongly pro-Zionist, recognize Israel as the legitimate and historic Jewish homeland built on solid moral foundations, and I'm always aware that should the anti-Semitic fever in the world ever rise to epidemic proportions, Israel, through the law of return, represents the only asylum available to those like myself." As historian Robert Wistrich writes, "The current rise of anti-Semitism is a herald of a catastrophe already in the making. For Jews not to pay heed to what is erupting all around them, and even to abet it by one or another form of complicity, is as tragic as it is imbecilic." Steve Goldberg will now introduce member of the Knesset, Danny Danon.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Doris Montrose, who is the most dedicated Zionist I know. With respect to our speaker, this is the most critical time in United States-Israeli relations that I can remember. This is an extremely high-pressure time. Israel is under attack, and right now it looks like its best friend in the world seems to be abandoning it. Knesset member Danny Danon is a leader, the most courageous nationalist member of the Knesset that I know. He has taken a great political risk, stands contrary to the wishes of the present Prime Minister. Mr. Danon has been started in the Batar movement. He's the chairman of World Likud. He is the youngest deputy speaker of the Knesset in history. He's on the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. He vigorously opposed the forced evacuation of Jews from Gush Katif, and he's opposed the freeze and taken a strong stand, and he's now taking a very strong stand in defense of a undivided Jerusalem as the capital of Israel eternally. He's here at this critical time to address us about the problems that Israel is facing. No one knows for sure what's going to happen in politics, and for anybody to predict it it's a fool's errand. It is rare to have somebody of this much integrity and honesty, and it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce my friend Danny Danon.
Shalom, Erev Tov. Good evening. It is my pleasure being here in such a full house. And I want to thank you for coming to hear me. Especially I know that there are some people here who came from far away. I met somebody who came from Arkansas, and I appreciate that. And some people came from Carmel, the city of Clint Eastwood. I wish he would have been here. We need somebody tough to support us. And I want to thank you, all of you who came to hear me and participate in this important event. And I want to thank Doris and Steve. Where is Doris? Doris, I want to tell you a story one of the great leaders that I admire is Yitzhak Shamir, the former Prime Minister of Israel. And when I was a shaliach of Betar Youth Movement in Florida many years ago, I had a chance to sit with Prime Minister Shamir after an event like the event we have here today, and I asked him, Mr. Shamir, what was the strength that you had to kick the British from Israel? How you did it as the leader of the underground? And he told me, listen to me, young Mr. Danon. You need three things in order to succeed in such important issues. First is ideology. Second, you need organization that we had in the underground. And third, most importantly, to be dedicated. And Doris, what you are doing here with this event is dedication. And that's what we need in Israel today. We need to be dedicated, not to be afraid, to be very strong. And today I want to share with you a few of the most important issues that are happening today in Israel. As a deputy speaker, I sit on most of the committees in the Knesset, and also as chairman of World Likud, I'm involved, and I speak and sit with the Prime Minister. I don't agree with him all the time, and when I don't agree with him, I tell him with respect that, Mr. Prime Minister, I don't agree with you, and that's what I told him. I told him tomorrow, before I left, when you go into the White House, be strong. Be strong on the issue of Jerusalem. Be strong on the issue... Be strong on the issue of settlement. Be strong on the issue of rights. We should be not afraid to say, Jews, we have rights to the land. It's about time that we will speak about our rights. We always speak... we always speak about the rights of the US, the rights of the EU, the rights of the Palestinian, but we have the rights to the land. And I think that today, what we see in Israel, we see awakening of the people in Israel. And it happened, unfortunately, thanks or because what happened in Gush Katif with the disengagement. I was against the disengagement. I fought the disengagement with all my strength. Prime Minister Sharon, which I was very close to him, he was the godfather of my oldest son. I have 3 children, and I was very close to him. The minute he decided to evacuate Jews for their homes, he became not my enemy, but my political rival, and I fought very hard against him. But one good thing happened, that the people in Israel have realized, after the disengagement, that it is not about land for peace. For many years, I stood up as a young Betar activist and said that the settlements are good for Israel's security. And the people from the left stood and say, land for peace. Give land and we will get peace. The disengagement proved we gave land. We evacuated 8,000 people. By the way, they still live like homeless in mobile homes. You know that fact, and you can see it in Nitzan and other places. Those people we evacuated. We took the cemetery. We took the synagogue. And what we received? We received missiles in Ashkelon, in Ashdod, and the Israelis are not stupid. And now, when I sit with colleagues from Labour, not Likud, not Betar, not the people that you think that average Israeli, who have 3 children, who have mortgage, who care mainly about who will win the next reality show in Channel 2 in Israel, they have realized that it is not about land for peace. It is not about what we are willing to give. It is not about what we are willing to pay. And today, it is very important that we will say it out loud to our friends in the US and to the people in the White House. It is not about what we are willing to give. It is about finding a viable partner. And I can speak with you for 1 hour about the biblical right we have to the land. And I believe in the biblical right. And we have here Jews and Christians today in this room who believe we have a biblical right to the land, and I consider myself to be one of them. I can speak with you for 1 hour about security issues, why it is not safe to divide the land and to build a 2-state solution. And today when I opened the New York Times, I saw a full-page ad. I don't know how much it cost. Maybe Mr. Miles Berman, you know the fact, but I don't know how much it costs to put a full-page ad in the New York Times where it says, divide the land. A 2-state solution, the clock is ticking, take action. And I ask myself, are those people, haven't they seen what happened with the disengagement? We tried, we gave away land, we received missiles. But leave aside the biblical right and the security issues. The most basic point is to find a viable partner. And we do not have a viable partner today. And we have to say to Secretary Clinton and to President Obama, like friends, like partners, there is no viable partner, and don't force us to make more mistakes. It's better not to have peace talks rather than to have fake peace talks. And we are not playing wishful thinking today in Israel. With all due respect to the Nobel Peace Prize, you cannot say because the American president won the Nobel Peace Prize, there will be peace process in Israel. But you need two for tango. And I'm asking you, with whom should we sit down and sign an agreement? With whom? With the Hamas? With the PA? They don't talk to one each other. Actually, if Abu Mazen will have to go to Gaza to sit with the Hamas, he will not be able to get back to Ramallah. So these basic issues, with whom you want us to sign the agreement? Who will be the signer? When you sign the agreement, when you buy an apartment or you buy a car, you check the lease, you check the title. You need to know with whom you are signing. We have nobody to sign with, nobody to negotiate with, and we should say to the US administration, don't force us to make mistakes that we will have to pay for the result of those mistakes. And the main issue that was discussed during the nice dinner Vice President Biden had with Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Vice President spoke about Jerusalem, and the Prime Minister spoke about Iran. And I think that is the main issue. I think we should focus on the main threat. It is not Ramat Shlomo. I don't see many Orthodox in the crowd here, but I went to Ramat Shlomo. It's a lovely Orthodox neighborhood where they want to build more apartments for Jewish families in Jerusalem. And it became an international issue. If Jews cannot build in Jerusalem, I'm asking you, what is the essence of Zionism? What is the essence of a Jewish state if we cannot actually build in Jerusalem apartments for Jewish families? So why we are fighting for so many years? And I think we have to be very brave on that matter and tell to the American administration, and I'm saying administration because I know it is not the American people, and I speak to the American people, and I know we have support, but to say to the American administration, take your hands from Jerusalem. This is one of the great leaders, Menachem Begin, when he signed the peace accord with Egypt, when President Carter told him, there is Mr. Begin, we have one more issue to discuss, the issue of Jerusalem. Menachem Begin told him, you can discuss that issue with President Sadat. I cannot stay in the room because I have no right to discuss Jerusalem. Jerusalem, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the Jewish people, and for that matter, I cannot even discuss it. And when the Prime Minister was strong and told it very directly to the American President, nobody discussed Jerusalem. But if we are starting to make compromise, and I don't know exactly what was told to Secretary Clinton in the issue of Jerusalem, but if it's true that the Prime Minister have promised to slow down the building, I think it is a mistake, and I will fight to change it, because we should not slow down anything regarding Jerusalem. I want to share with you the story of Har Homa. Anyone here have been in the neighborhood of Har Homa in Jerusalem? 1996. Do you remember who was the Prime Minister in Israel? Benjamin Netanyahu. Who was the President in the White House? Clinton, Secretary of State? Madeleine Albright. I was protesting. I wasn't a member of Knesset then. I was protesting then, and I told the Prime Minister to sign the bids to build in Har Homa. President Clinton told him and Secretary Albright, if you build in Har Homa, there will be international chaos. There will be war in the Middle East. because you're dividing Bethlehem from Jerusalem, and Arafat will not let it happen. And we put pressure on the Prime Minister within the Knesset, political pressure, and outside the Knesset. At the end, the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, picked up the phone. He called President Clinton. He told him, I have to build in Har Homa. Otherwise, I have no coalition. There are 17 MKs, and I will not be a Prime Minister. So Clinton told him, I understand. I am not happy, but I understand. You know what happened? Go today to Har Homa and see what happened. No chaos, no international pressure, nothing happened. 6,000 units, 21,000 Jews living in Har Homa neighborhood, a lovely neighborhood, peaceful neighborhood in Jerusalem, and that will be the case with Ramat Shlomo, with Gilo, with Pisgat Ze'ev. We should not be afraid to say exactly what we think. And today, when we try to discuss the issue of Iran, we need to speak out. And frankly speaking, the Prime Minister and the government and the army, we're putting a lot of time and efforts on the issue of Iran. And I'm calling my colleagues in the Knesset and the people in the Congress, in the Senate, to deal with the main issue. Focus in the main threat. The main threat is Iran. I was in Colombia a few months ago, meeting the Colombian president. And during the meeting, he showed me the map of South America, and he asked me, do you know what there is between the border between Colombia and Venezuela? And I didn't know the answer. I thought it's a jungle. He told me, no, there is a camp of Iranian troops training Hezbollah warriors in South America. As we speak, it's happening today. So globalization of terror, it's a threat to you. If God forbid there will be a nuclear bomb in Iran, it can find its way to the port of Los Angeles, of San Diego, San Francisco. Nobody guarantees that Israel will be the first one to suffer from that threat. And we should say it out loud. The Iranian threat is a threat to all Western societies. And see today what's happening with Hezbollah. And I can tell you a secret. When we sit down and we talk with Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, they don't talk with us about the Palestinian issue. They don't talk with us about Ramat Shlomo. They don't talk with us about building in Gilo. They talk about the Iranian threat, because it is a threat to the regime in Egypt, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, and that's what we should focus on, that threat. And I believe that we will wait and we will try to convince the Western societies to act on the issue of Iran. But if God forbid there will be no other choice, Israel is getting ready to deal with the threat of Iran. It should not be the war. It should not be the war of Israel against Iran, of Jews against Muslims. It should not. But if there will be no other choice, we have the military capability, but it shouldn't be the war of only Israel dealing with that threat. And we all remember that when Menachem Begin took the decision to bomb the nuclear reactor in Iraq, he was condemned. He was condemned by the US, he was condemned by the UN, he was condemned by the European countries, it was before the EU, he was condemned even by Shimon Peres, who was in the opposition then. He was condemned by everyone, but he took that decision. And years later, when Bush invaded Iraq, he said, I have to admit it was the most important decision that was made by the Prime Minister Menachem Begin. And that is the case today. We have to focus on the main threat, which is Iran, and we have to keep saying it. I have to be honest with you that I'm skeptical, because I have heard President Obama saying that by the end of the year, and he meant by the end of 2009, he will decide what he will do with Iran. And now we are already in 2010, and I don't see real sanctions, real crippling sanctions. And when I say sanctions, I mean that Iranians will not be able to fly to Los Angeles airport, that they will not be able to transfer funds to banks all over the world. I mean that they will not be able to do all the refinery They have a lot of oil, but they don't have the refinery capability. So if there will be real sanctions, they will not be able to use all the oil they are producing. I don't see it happening. I see the US and the EU and other countries, they're talking about sanctions, but they keep signing contracts and agreements, and they're looking at how much money they can make out of Iran, and not how to really put crippling sanctions. I know that those of you, and most of you, do follow everything that happened in Israel. You hear a lot about my activity on these issues of settlement, of the right to the land, of a US-Israel relationship, but I'm putting most of my time as a member of Knesset in legislation. I'm chairman of the committee on the right of the child, and I know we are now dealing with the children here of Holocaust survivor. And frankly speaking, and I think I convinced the Prime Minister on that matter, we are going nowhere with the Palestinian track. With all due respect and with all the pressure, we are not going nowhere. So we need to put our time and our efforts into the education system in Israel, into the welfare system in Israel, and not try to go and invent a partner. We should put the time into the education. And I am, as the chairman of the committee, I'm pushing legislation that Israeli kids will go to visit Jerusalem. 54% from 54% from secular Israelis will not be in Jerusalem until they reach the age of 18. Can you believe that? 54%. Kids from Gadera, Hadera, Haifa, Nahariya, you name it. You have families there, you have friends. 54%. It's troubling, and I'm worried about it. And on that matter, I'm now pushing legislation that it will be mandatory to visit Jerusalem at least once in elementary school and once in high school. And the Prime Minister adopted an idea of teaching the children education of Jewish heritage, of Zionism. And we had a previous Minister of Education who put into the curriculum the Nakba. You know what is the Nakba? The Nakba, the day of the Palestinians lost their land in 1948. It was taught in the textbook of the Ministry of Education, Israeli Ministry of Education. So now we're taking out the Nakba and we're putting back Jabotinsky. And that's what we should focus now on: education, on Zionists, on values. And I think that in the long term, when there will be a partner and when we will be strong, and Zev Jabotinsky, who was one of the main leaders of Zionism, he wrote a very important article which is called the Iron Wall. And he meant the Iron Wall, he didn't mean the wall that we are building now in Judea and Samaria. And he didn't mean all the cement we are putting on the roof in Sderot and Ashkelon. The Iron Wall that Jabotinsky wrote about, he meant the inner strength of the Jewish people. When we will be so strong, and the Arab countries will understand that we are here to stay and we are very strong, then we will be able to achieve genuine peace. And I think what we need to do now is we need to work together to build the Iron Wall, to continue together. And I know that you are involved and you care. We should continue to build the Iron Wall, because that is the only way we will prevail. And if someone thinks that it's about what we are willing to give, I can let you speak not with me or somebody from Likud, from MKs from Labour, which I was supposed to debate, but I could not debate, because this lady, she said in the debate, I agree with Danny, that even if we give away Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, we will not have peace. And it's somebody from Labour telling that. So the reality today, and we have to say it out loud, it is not about what Israel is willing to give. We saw it in Gush Katif. We had the hatred of Arab before 1948, before there was even a Jewish state, and we had it after we evacuated Jews from Gush Katif. See what's happening today in Gaza. And on that matter, I can assure you that today the people in Israel, they woke up, they understood what's happening, and today we have to be strong with your support, and we will overcome the crisis with the US administration. I can assure you there will be more crises. I hope I will not be blamed for the future crisis, but there will be more crises. But nobody remembers those crises. But the result on the ground are important. And when Prime Minister Sharon evacuated Jews, he received a letter from President Bush. You remember that letter? And on that letter, President Bush wrote to Prime Minister Sharon that we will be able to build in major cities in Judea and Samaria. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu showed that letter to Secretary Clinton, she told him, we do not recognize letters that were signed by the previous administration. So I'm asking you, and I'm not getting into the political aspects, we should not think about what the administration wants or think, because we are there to stay with the result. We are there to stay with the consequences, and that's why we have to do what is good for the Jewish people, what is good for the state of Israel, and that's the only way we will prevail. Thank you. Steve, I understand there are a few questions.
If you, this on? Okay. If you have questions, pass them to Doris. I have some now. A lot of them overlap, so I'm trying to synthesize them to make sure we get all the common points. First question. Are you opposed to the creation of a Palestinian state, and do you have an alternative?
Yes, yes, and yes. I think that we should say out loud, a Palestinian state is a danger to the existence of Israel. And we should say it clearly, and we have an alternative. And whenever we raise the alternative, people tell us it will not be accepted. And I will, in a nutshell, you can read in my website of World Likud, or my website, the full alternative of the national camp. But basically, the alternative speaks that there will be no connection between Gaza and Judea and Samaria. And believe it or not, it happened in the last few years without even anyone planning it. There is no connection between Gaza and Judea and Samaria. And the US was willing to build a tunnel or a train, everything they was willing to build to make the connection between Gaza and Judea and Samaria. I think in the long term, there will be a regional agreement where the Palestinian in Gaza will be connected with Egypt, and the Palestinian in the cities of Judea and Samaria will be connected into Jordan. Most of the land in Judea and Samaria is vacant. Somebody can tell me what is the percentage of the land which is what's so-called occupied by Jews in Judea and Samaria? 3%. That's occupied land. I wish we occupied 90% of the land. I wish we had 1 million Jews on the hills, but the majority of the hills of Judea and Samaria, it's vacant. So my long-term vision that the vacant land with the Jewish population will be part of Israel, and the cities where you have the majority of population will be confederated with Jordan.
The Obama administration seems to be reluctant to impose crippling sanctions, is delaying whatever sanctions will be imposed. What is the timeline that you foresee before Israel takes decisive action?
I cannot tell you exact details, but I can tell you what is being already published. And I sit in the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. The Israeli Air Force is training the troops there to go to the direction of flying to Iran. There were a few drills. There were a few drills that we flew to Spain back and forth, and the reason we flew to Spain, it's not because we wanted to see Barcelona or Madrid. Even though I heard it's nice, I haven't been there yet. It is not the reason. The reason it is because the same distance to fly to Tehran from Tel Aviv. But it is a very hard decision to take, because the consequences will be that the civilian population in Israel will have to be in shelters for a long period of time. And as a government elected, and I think with the Prime Minister, It is a hard decision to take, not because we think about the pilots and about the army, because we think about the civilian that will be in shelters for a month or 2 months, and for that matter we will try to do our best to convince other nations to do that job, but if there will be no other choice, we will take that decision.
You mentioned talking about the Jews' legal rights to Judea and Samaria. Can you elaborate on that? And then what would you do with the Arabs that live in Judea and Samaria?
I think I have answered that question, that first of all, it is very hard for a politician to come and to tell to the public, I have no alternative for tomorrow. Everybody come with an agenda for tomorrow. You do that, you sign here, you have peace. I'm telling you the opposite. Nothing will happen in the near future. And it is hard to be elected on a platform when you tell the people we should not do anything in the near future. In the long term, I believe we can find an agreement, a regional agreement with Jordan and Egypt, where the population in Judea and Samaria will be part of Jordan. But it's a long term, it's not a short term. And the people, the public, they want short term. They want to get an answer. If we do 1, 2, and 3, we will achieve peace tomorrow morning. That will not happen. And I think we should, the Likud, tell it to the public that it is not going to happen in the near future. And one of the generals told me, I asked him what we will do in Gaza. Because we went in, and you read the Goldstone report, and I have to tell you that I'm not worried about the Goldstone report. Even though it is anti-Semite, it's hurting Israel, but it is better to have the Goldstone report rather than to have Israeli children in Sderot living in shelters for years. So I prefer that we will get reports from Goldstone and other people like him, rather than we'll put Israeli children in shelters. But I have asked this general what we will do in Gaza. He told me, if you have a skin disease, and I know there are a few doctors in the crowd, you have to go to the Dead Sea every year. That's what we will do in Gaza. We will have to go there every year or 2 or 3 years, and it's not going to be a short term. And we have to admit that we are talking about conflict maintenance and not conflict resolution. Because you hear a lot of people who come to you, if you do 1, 2, 3, you resolve the conflict. And I'm saying to you, it's not going to happen in the near future. Let's speak about conflict maintenance.
The official line from the Israeli government is that the Obama, Clinton, Biden administration are friends of Israel and they're grateful for the friendship. In your view, is that really the view of the Israeli people, the government, and what's your view?
We have excellent relationship with the American people. Israelis admire the American people. Sometimes it's absurd. Yom HaAtzmaut, Day of Independence, you see people putting on their cars the Israeli flag and the American flag. And it's Israel Day of Independence. But it shows you the deep connection that we have to the American people. And I think there is a problem with the administration, and it happened not with Ramat Shlomo. A few months ago, President Obama went to China. He gave an interview to Fox News. And on that interview, he said that Jews should not build in Gilo. And the minute he said that Jews cannot build in Gilo, he lost a lot of points among Israelis. Because Gilo is considered, and it is part of Jerusalem. And even Tzipi Livni, the leader of the opposition, she had to come and say, I do not agree with President Obama because we have full rights to build in Jerusalem. And I think that he lost a lot of points, but I believe that we have a strong relationship with the American people, with the Congress, with the Senate, and I don't know. I remember that at the first year with Prime Minister Sharon, with Bush, which we all, we consider now, we look back and say, where is Bush? We wish he was back in the White House. But in the first year, Prime Minister Sharon had many disputes with President Bush. So we hope that also we will be able to convince the administration that it is not about what we are willing to give, it is not about what we are willing to sign, and then we will see a change with the relationship.
What about the problem with the Israeli Arabs inside Israel? What's your point of view on that?
There is a major problem, and I see it, that we have to make a differentiation between the Arab Israelis and the leadership of the Arab Israelis. Because the leadership of Arab Israelis, they choose to incite and to fight against Israel rather than to deal with closing the gaps. And there are gaps in terms of education, infrastructure, and I support last week we invested more than 200 million shekels in Arab population in Israel because we need to close the gaps. But what I see in the Knesset, and I see it with the Arab member of Knesset, that they don't deal with how we make the lives of the Arab better in Israel. They choose to deal how we can work with the enemies. And I give you a few examples. Taleb Hasana, MK, a Bedouin MK, he, during a rally, took the cell phone, I don't have it with me, it's with Johnny, my advisor, he took the cell phone of the Knesset, and he broadcast a speech of Hania, the leader of Hamas. And he used the cell phone of the Knesset to deliver the speech of the leader of Hamas. And you have MK Tzartzur, who said that the Hamas should have kidnapped Gilad Shalit many years ago. A member of Knesset, a congressman. And you have member of Knesset, Hanin Zouabi. She's a very educated, and she was saying that she wished that Iran will get a nuclear capability to balance what Israel has. And I hear those members of Knesset, and I think they are crossing the line. And I want to tell you the story of Azmi Bishara. He was a former member of Knesset, and he was sitting in the Knesset during the Second Lebanon War. We were in shelters, half of Israel. We went into shelters, and you supported us. All of you supported us. And when we were in shelters, Azmi Bishara, from the Knesset, talking on the phone with Hezbollah, and we have records, it's not stories, we have the tapes, talking with Hezbollah and telling them where to send missiles in Israel. He was paid $450,000 for the information. By the way, he didn't give them any real information. But the fact that he spoke with them and told them that to send the missiles to Hadera and to Haifa, and he cooperated with them. And what we did, if it was happening here in the Congress, in 2 minutes, he was in jail. I don't know, in Guantanamo, I don't know where, but he would be in jail. With Israel, we called him to investigation, and we showed him the tapes. And the minute he realized that he's going to jail, and he has immunity as a member of Knesset, he fled the country, and today he sits in Jordan, and I have to fight now and change the legislation because he receives pension from the Knesset, 7,000 shekel a month. So I have to go now and change the law in Israel and to fight the Ministry of Justice so he will not receive pension from the Knesset. So I think that I'm willing to support the Arab population, and somebody yesterday approached me about if I will object that the US will give additional funding for Arab population in Israel. I told him as long as it's not on the account of what we receive for the military, I will support it. I think we should invest more within the Arab population. But when I see the leaders of the Arab population, I say we have to fight those leaders. We have to get them out of the Knesset. We have to make sure that they are... we have to make sure that there are the real leaders who represent the needs of the Arab Israelis that will be in the Knesset. Because I want, and we must have Arab member of Knesset in the Knesset. It's a democracy. It's the strength of democracy. But we cannot allow what's happening today.
The people voted for Likud, which represented that stood for the right of the Jews to live every place in Judea and Samaria, and that Jerusalem would be undivided. Now there's an unprecedented 10-month settlement freeze, and there are discussions of at least a slowdown in building in Jerusalem. How do you explain this change in the Likud, and are there others in the Likud, other than yourself, who are speaking out against this?
You know, when you write a law, it's like poetry. You enjoy the process, you think about it, you do research. And I have to tell you, one of the laws that I had to think about and to work, which I didn't like, was compensation to the Jews who live in Judea and Samaria and cannot build their homes. And I was successful, and I convinced the Prime Minister, and we got 160 million shekels compensation. But I'm ashamed that we have to pay people who want to build their home in Judea and Samaria. And I think we were elected on a different platform. And what I'm telling you here publicly, and I know that Doris, it's it will be in YouTube in 10 minutes probably after we finish. I told it to the Prime Minister, if we would have told the public in Israel that we will put a freeze on the settlement, you wouldn't have been a Prime Minister and I wouldn't have been a member of Knesset. We were elected on a different platform. We were not elected to perform the ideology of Kadima and Labour. And on that matter, I'm fighting fiercely to change that decision, and we will have a vote within the Central Committee of the party, and that's one of the things that the Prime Minister doesn't like, that I give him a hard time on that issue, and I will continue. And I believe, and he promised publicly, that in September 26 we will resume the building in Judea and Samaria. If, God forbid, it will not happen, it will not be only myself standing and fighting the Prime Minister. There are few ministers within the government who told me and told the Prime Minister that that date is crucial for them to see where we go. Because I don't think we should tell Jews in Ma'ale Adumim, Ariel, Givat Ze'ev that they cannot build their home. They are not second-class citizens. And the freeze, it's a mistake not because they cannot build, not because of the humanitarian side of that, which is important. It is important because the public voted for us, because nobody thinks that the settlement are obstacle to peace. The settlement are a necessity. The settlement, I look at them as the real pioneers today. And I think we should have them, we should bless them, and we should not tell them you cannot build and we're putting a freeze on your homes. Yeah, I think you got to the point. Speak out, first of all. Speak out, don't be shy. Also for us, it's important to know we have support. When I was interviewed by Israeli IDF radio, Galet Tzahal, actually it's the only country in the world I know that they have a radio of the army, which is the most popular radio in Israel. But I was interviewed by Galet Tzahal, and I was quoted telling Secretary Clinton to not interfere with the municipal issue of Jerusalem. The reporter asked me, aren't you afraid that we will not get support from the US anymore? And I'm not afraid. But the more you speak out, and the more you write, and the more your voice is being heard, it gives us strength. And I can assure you that the Prime Minister, when he will step into the White House to meet President Obama, he will feel much stronger than the last time he stepped in. Because now he knows, maybe it's because what happened in Massachusetts, maybe it's because, I don't know what, but he will feel much stronger. So for that matter, I urge you to speak out on that matter. And personally speaking, I do pay a price to say what I think. And I can tell you frankly, because when you are not going with the line of the leader, and sometimes we have Likud faction meeting every Monday. It's a small meeting, no press, no advisors, where we speak with the Prime Minister. And I tell him that I don't agree what he said in Bar Ilan about two-state solution. And I don't agree what he did with the settlement freeze. And I don't agree with apologizing for the building in Jerusalem. And I have other MKs that come to me and they tell me, Yofi, 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 which is well done, well done. So I tell them, why don't you say it to the Prime Minister? Why you Yofi, Yofi me when we're stepping out of the room? Tell it publicly. But they are not saying it because they know that they don't want to lose points with other places. So I'm willing to lose points. So I didn't go with the Prime Minister to Moscow or to AIPAC, and I will not go with him because I will say exactly what I believe. And I know that there is a tremendous support in Israel for those ideas, and also here in this room. I want Doris to thank you for the opportunity. She was very capable of persisting, of making that event, and I appreciate that. And also for personally in my career, when I speak with youngsters, and I speak a lot in high schools, in universities, I encourage people to join the public life. It's hard. You don't spend a lot of time with your family, but I tell them that's where you make a change. And the most important thing is to be persistent. And if we will be persistent and will continue, we will prevail, and with that Hashem, we will win all our enemies. Thank you.